I'm Heather Reynolds, 34, and that Thanksgiving changed everything. When my sister Megan smirked across the table and said, "Where's your husband and kids?" "Oh, right, you don't have any." I expected my parents to defend me. Instead, they laughed along while my VP promotion at Anderson Marketing sat unmentioned. As cranberry sauce congealed on fine china, something inside me finally snapped. I smiled tightly, but in that moment, I made myself a promise. This would be the last time they'd ever make me feel small. Before I dive into what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever had family underestimate you, and subscribe to join our community of survivors and thrivers. The Thanksgiving mockery wasn't an isolated incident. It was just the latest in a lifelong pattern I had somehow normalized until that breaking point. Growing up in suburban Boston, Megan was always the golden child. 2 years younger, with our mother's blonde curls and our father's charm, she effortlessly collected parental approval while I worked twice as hard for half the recognition. When I brought home straight A's, my report card would get a cursory good job before everyone turned their attention to Megan's soccer trophy or dance recital. "Your sister is so naturally gifted," my mother would say, as if my academic achievements were somehow less valuable because they came through diligent effort rather than natural talent. By high school, the pattern was deeply established. I was captain of the debate team and editor of the school newspaper, but my parents attended maybe one debate competition across 4 years. Meanwhile, they never missed a single one of Megan's cheerleading events. "We're just so busy with work, Heather," my father would explain when I expressed disappointment. Yet somehow, they always found time for Megan. College deepened the divide. I won a partial scholarship to Northwestern for journalism, but needed additional financial support. "We just don't have it right now," my parents explained. I took out loans, worked 2 campus jobs, and graduated with honors despite the exhaustion. 2 years later, when Megan decided she wanted to attend a small liberal arts college with no scholarship, my parents somehow found $40,000 for her tuition. When I cautiously questioned this discrepancy over a holiday break, my mother said, "Well, Megan needs more help than you do. You've always been so independent." Independence wasn't a choice I made, it was forced upon me. The pattern continued into adulthood. I built my marketing career methodically, moving from entry level to management through relentless work ethic. Meanwhile, Megan married Tyler right after college, had twins by 25, and bought a beautiful colonial in our hometown. At every family gathering, the conversation centered around Megan's children, Megan's home renovations, Megan's community volunteering. My promotions, travels, and achievements existed in a conversational black hole. The first major betrayal I recognized happened 3 years ago. My cousin Rachel pulled me aside at a family reunion and asked why I never responded to her wedding invitation. "What invitation?" I asked, genuinely confused. Rachel looked uncomfortable. "The one I sent to your parents' house since I didn't have your current address. Megan told me you said weddings were bourgeois social contracts, and you didn't attend them on principle." I was stunned. I had never said anything remotely like that. Later, I discovered Megan had been systematically poisoning my relationships with extended family, painting me as an elitist career woman who looked down on traditional values. The second betrayal hit harder. My grandmother had always told me her vintage emerald earrings would be mine someday. "For my thoughtful Heather," she'd say. After she passed, I respectfully waited for my mother to mention them. She never did. 6 months later, at Christmas dinner, Megan walked in wearing them. "Mom gave them to me," she explained casually when she caught me staring. "They match my eyes better anyway." My mother avoided eye contact when I looked at her. She knew exactly what she'd done. That night, I called my college friend Robert, the only person who truly understood my family dynamic, after witnessing it firsthand during a disastrous spring break visit years ago. "You need to start documenting this stuff," he said. "I've been telling you for years this isn't normal family tension, Heather. This is systematic emotional abuse." I had always resisted that label. But as I lay in bed in my childhood room, surrounded by the evidence that I had always been an afterthought in my own family, something shifted. I started a note on my phone, recording every slight, every dismissal, every broken promise I could remember. It was only then, seeing it all written down, that I realized how thoroughly I had been gaslit into believing I deserved less than my sister. That Christmas was the first time I consciously recognized I was being mistreated. But it would take another year and that fateful Thanksgiving mockery before I found the courage to do something about it. I left Thanksgiving dinner early, claiming a work emergency. No one questioned it. My dedication to my career was a family punchline at this point. I drove back to my apartment in Boston in a fog of hurt and anger, replaying Megan's words and my parents' laughter on loop. That night, I called Robert. "I can't do this anymore," I said, voice breaking. "I'm 34 years old, and I still leave every family gathering feeling like I'm 16 and worthless." "You're not worthless," Robert said firmly. "You're a VP at one of the top marketing firms in Boston. You've built an amazing life completely on your own. Your family is too caught up in their own narrative to see your value, but that doesn't diminish it." I swiped at tears. "It shouldn't hurt this much still. It hurts because you keep hoping they'll change, that they'll finally see you." He was right. Despite everything, I kept returning to family events, with a tiny, persistent hope that this time would be different. This time they'd be proud. This time it'd be enough. "What would you tell a client whose brand was being consistently undermined in the market?" Robert asked suddenly. I laughed through tears at his marketing analogy. It'd tell them to reposition and reintroduce themselves on their own terms. Exactly. So why aren't you doing that with your family? The question hit me like a lightning bolt. Why was I letting them define my narrative? The very next day, I discovered yet another betrayal that cemented my resolve. A colleague from our New York office mentioned meeting my sister at a charity gala. She was telling everyone how worried your family is about your workaholic tendencies and possible depression, Jessica said uncomfortably. "I wanted to check if you're okay." I was stunned. Megan had never attended any charity event related to my company, except apparently when it served her purpose to undermine me professionally. It'd recently been mentioned as a candidate for a major promotion that would involve relocating to the New York office. Was Megan intentionally sabotaging that opportunity? When I confronted her by phone, she laughed it off. "I was just making conversation, Heather. Don't be so sensitive. Besides, we are worried about you. It's not normal to be your age without having built a personal life." My parents, predictably, defended her when I called them. "Megan meant well," my mother insisted. "She's concerned about your happiness." That was the moment I stopped seeking their understanding and started planning my counterattack. I began with a careful social media strategy. As a marketing professional, I understood the power of controlled narrative. I hadn't been particularly active online before, preferring privacy, but I realized this had allowed Megan to control my story unopposed. I started posting thoughtfully curated glimpses into my life, travel photos from business trips, positioned as adventures, behind-the-scenes looks at exciting campaigns, group pictures with colleagues and friends that showcased a rich social network. I never explicitly bragged or directly countered Megan's narrative. I simply presented evidence of a fulfilling, dynamic life. I also began engaging more actively with extended family online, commenting thoughtfully on their posts, and sharing genuine connections. Slowly, my cousins and aunts who had been fed Megan's twisted version of me began reaching out directly. "We've missed you at family gatherings," my cousin Rachel wrote. "Your life looks amazing." Within weeks, I noticed a shift. My parents seemed confused by the positive attention I was receiving from extended family. My father actually called to ask about a marketing award I'd received that he'd seen mentioned on Facebook. "Why didn't you tell us about this?" he asked. "I did," I replied calmly. "At Easter dinner, right after I mentioned my promotion." The silence on his end spoke volumes. But the most satisfying reaction came from Megan. She began posting frantically about her blessed family life and the fulfillment of motherhood multiple times daily, with an increasingly desperate edge. She started commenting on my posts with backhanded compliments. "So glad work travels fills the void for you. And always working. Hope you find time for real life someday." I never responded to these jabs. I didn't have to. Other family members and friends began defending me in the comments. "Heather's life looks incredible, and not everyone needs the same life path to be happy." For the first time, I wasn't fighting this battle alone, and the power dynamic had subtly begun to shift. It was a small first victory, but it gave me confidence that I could reclaim my narrative. What I didn't yet realize was how much darker the situation would get before I found true resolution. The text message from Tyler came 2 weeks after my social media campaign began. "Need to talk to you privately. Important." My brother-in-law and I had never been particularly close. Had always seemed pleasant but passive, deferring to Megan in all family matters. We'd never had a one-on-one conversation of substance in the entire 10 years He'd been married to my sister. We met at a coffee shop halfway between Boston and my parents' suburb. Tyler looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, nervously shredding a napkin. "Megan doesn't know him here," he said immediately. "What's going on, Tyler?" He took a deep breath. "Things aren't what they seem with Megan and me. Our marriage has been in trouble for years. The perfect family image she projects, it's all a facade." I stayed silent, letting him continue. "There's a lot you don't know, Heather. Financial things, mainly." His voice dropped. "Megan has a gambling problem. It started with occasional casino trips after the twins were born. Postpartum stress, she said. Then online poker. Now it's sports betting, daily fantasy, everything." I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. "We've remortgaged the house twice," Tyler continued. "Maxed out credit cards. I've been working double shifts at the hospital to keep up, but it's never enough. And your parents?" He trailed off, looking even more uncomfortable. "What about my parents?" I pressed. "They've been giving us money, a lot of money, for years." This wasn't entirely surprising. I knew my parents had helped with their house down payment. But Tyler's next revelation stunned me. "The thing is, Megan told your parents that we were lending you money, that you were constantly asking us for financial help with credit card debt." I nearly knocked over my coffee. "What?" "I've never asked anyone in the family for a penny since college." "I know," Tyler said miserably. "But that's not all. Last year, when your parents gave us $30,000 that wiped out a big chunk of their retirement savings, Megan told them it was because you had a gambling addiction and were facing eviction." The betrayal was so enormous, so calculated, that I couldn't process it immediately. "Why are you telling me this now?" I finally asked. "Because I can't live with the lies anymore. And honestly, after seeing your posts online, I realized you have no idea what's been happening. You think this is about favoritism, but it's much worse. Megan has been actively sabotaging you while using your name to funnel money from your parents." Over the next hour, Tyler revealed the shocking extent of Megan's deceptions. She had created elaborate stories about my supposed financial and personal failures, positioning herself as the supportive sister who was helping bail me out. Meanwhile, she was draining our parents' retirement accounts to feed her gambling addiction, while maintaining the perfect suburban lifestyle that made her the family success story. I left that coffee shop with my worldview completely shattered. The systematic favoritism I'd experienced my entire life suddenly seemed almost secondary to this active conspiracy. That evening, I called my childhood friend Claire, who had witnessed my family dynamic firsthand growing up. When I explained what I'd learned, she wasn't as surprised as I expected. "I always thought something was off with how your parents treated you," she said. "Remember when they missed your high school graduation for Megan's regional dance competition? That went beyond normal sibling rivalry." "I need to confront them," I said. "Not yet," Claire cautioned. "You need evidence. If you go in with just Tyler's word, Megan will turn it around on you both. You need to find proof of the financial manipulation before you make any accusations." She was right. If I was going to expose this level of betrayal, I needed to be strategic. I couldn't afford another emotional confrontation where Megan would emerge victorious through manipulation and lies. Over the next few weeks, with Tyler's help, I began investigating the family finances. He provided bank statements showing transfers from my parents' accounts. I discovered their home equity line of credit had been nearly maxed out, supposedly for Heather's emergencies. Most disturbing was finding that my parents had secretly sold a vacation property in Maine that had been in our family for generations. A cottage had been promised could serve as my wedding venue someday. They'd sold it at below market value for quick cash, again to help with Heather's financial troubles. The scope of Megan's deception was breathtaking. And with each discovery, my resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about standing up for myself anymore. My parents were being exploited and manipulated by their golden child, while I was cast as the family failure. With Claire and Robert's emotional support and Tyler's inside information, I began formulating a more comprehensive plan. But I had no idea that Megan had already sensed the shifting dynamics and was preparing her own counterattack. Easter Sunday arrived with perfect spring weather and my stomach in knots. I hadn't been to a family gathering since Thanksgiving's humiliation, begging off Christmas with a conveniently timed business trip to Chicago that was actually just me and Robert watching holiday movies in my apartment. I couldn't avoid this one. The entire extended family would be there, and my absence would only fuel Megan's narrative about my supposed isolation and depression. I arrived at my parents' home carefully, prepared, emotionally armored, and strategically dressed in a crisp blue sheath dress that projected success without trying too hard. I brought an expensive honey-baked ham and a portfolio containing selected financial documents Tyler had provided. Heather. My mother air-kissed my cheek. We were beginning to think you'd forgotten where we live. Work keeps me busy, I said neutrally, noticing how her eyes narrowed slightly at my composed demeanor. She was used to me being eager to please, visibly hurt, or defensively overcompensating. My calm confidence was new territory. Megan was holding court in the living room, the twins dressed in matching Easter outfits running circles around her. She barely acknowledged my arrival, though I caught her assessing my appearance with a quick up-and-down glance. The first hour passed in deceptively pleasant small talk. My Aunt Susan asked about my recent business trip to San Francisco that she'd seen on Instagram. It was fantastic, I shared genuinely. We landed the Westfield account, which is huge for the agency. What's Westfield? My father asked, surprisingly engaged. Only the third largest retail development company in the country, I explained. The campaign we're developing will be national. Before he could respond, Megan cut in. Speaking of developments, did Mom tell you we're adding a sunroom? Tyler's practice is doing so well, we decided to finally make it happen. I caught Tyler's uncomfortable expression from across the room. His dermatology practice was successful, but I now knew they were barely staying afloat financially. That's great, I said evenly, refusing to let her derail the first positive conversation I'd had with my father in months. But Megan wasn't finished. It must be nice having so much freedom to travel for work, though I can't imagine trading my family time for hotel rooms and airport lounges. She laughed lightly. Different priorities, I guess. In the past, I would have retreated from this implicit criticism. This time, I smiled directly at her. Yes, we do have different priorities. I'm fortunate to have built a career that's intellectually fulfilling and allows me to make strategic decisions for major brands. We all make choices. A flicker of surprise crossed her face at my uncharacteristic pushback. My mother quickly intervened. Megan, why don't you check on the scalloped potatoes? Heather, help me with the table. In the dining room, my mother busied herself with place cards. You seem different, she observed cautiously. I am different, I agreed. I've been doing a lot of thinking about family dynamics. She froze momentarily. What does that mean? It means I've been reflecting on patterns, like why you and Dad have given Megan so much financial support over the years, while telling me you couldn't help with my education. Her hand trembled slightly as she arranged silverware. We've always treated you girls equally. Megan just needed more help with the twins. And the twins weren't born when you paid for her entire college education, but told me to take out loans. I interrupted calmly. Or when you gave them the down payment for their house while I was living with 3 roommates trying to make rent in Boston. That's not fair, Heather. Your sister has different priorities. I finished for her. Yes, I know. But I'm curious about something. How much money have you and Dad given Megan and Tyler over the past 5 years? My mother's face flushed. That's not appropriate dinner conversation. Is it because you don't know the total? Or because it would be embarrassing to admit? Before she could answer, my father entered carrying serving dishes. Head clearly overheard enough to sense tension. Everything okay in here? Heather's interrogating me about family finances, my mother said tightly. My father set down the dishes with deliberate care. That's not really your business, Heather. It became my business when Megan started telling you she was lending me money, I replied. The shock on his face confirmed Tyler's account. Is it true you sold the Maine cottage because Megan told you I needed money? My father's expression hardened. Your sister was trying to help you without hurting your pride. She told us about your credit card debt, and I have no credit card debt, I stated flatly. I have an emergency fund, retirement savings, and stock options. I've never asked Megan for a penny in my life. My mother looked genuinely confused, but she showed us the transfer receipts. Those weren't transfers to me. The conversation was escalating faster than I'd planned, but there was no turning back. Megan has been lying to you for years to get money. My father's face darkened with anger. That's enough. I don't know what kind of jealous narrative you've constructed, but this stops now. Your sister has always looked out for you, even when you've been difficult and ungrateful. The word ungrateful hit like a physical blow. Ungrateful for what, exactly? For being ignored? For having my achievements dismissed? For being used as the family scapegoat while Megan drains your retirement accounts? You've always been jealous of your sister. My father shot back, his voice rising. Always competing. always trying to prove you're somehow better with your fancy job and city apartment. Some of us value family over career ambition. And some of us, I replied, my voice shaking despite my best efforts, value honesty over comforting delusions. That's it, my father snapped. I've tried to understand your lifestyle choices. But the truth is, Heather, you've always been difficult to love, always pushing away the people who care about you, always thinking you're somehow above the rest of us. The dining room fell silent. My mother gasped softly. Even my father seemed momentarily shocked by his own words. The revelation hung in the air, painful but clarifying. After years of wondering why I wasn't enough, I finally had my answer. My father had just admitted what I'd always suspected but never wanted to believe. Loving me had been a burden, a chore, a challenge they'd never quite managed to meet. I stood perfectly still, absorbing the blow while refusing to crumble under it. Thank you for your honesty, I said finally, my voice steady despite the tears threatening. I won't make loving me difficult for you anymore. I walked out of the dining room, past wide-eyed relatives who had overheard everything, past Megan's smug expression barely concealing triumph, past Tyler's look of helpless sympathy. I drove home in a fog of pain so acute it felt physical. That night, alone in my apartment, I finally allowed myself to break down completely. Grieving not just for the family I'd never truly had, but for the decades I'd spent trying to earn love that should have been freely given. The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages, my mother attempting damage control, my father justifying his words, relatives expressing awkward concern. I answered none of them. Instead, I made an appointment with a therapist and sent a single text to Robert. You were right. I'm done trying to change their narrative about me. It wasn't a victory. It was devastating. But in the ashes of that confrontation, I found something unexpected. The freedom of finally seeing the truth, no matter how painful, and the first fragile seeds of true self-worth that weren't dependent on family validation. In the aftermath of the Easter disaster, I withdrew completely from family contact. I blocked Megan's number after a barrage of accusatory texts, muted my parents' calls, and took a week of personal leave from work, the first voluntary vacation I'd taken in 3 years. During that week, I began therapy with Dr. Martinez, a family systems specialist who helped me see how deeply the patterns of favoritism had shaped my entire identity and approach to relationships. You've been trying to earn love through achievement your entire life, she observed during our second session. But in healthy families, love isn't earned, it's given. So what now? I asked. Just accept that my family is toxic and move on. That's one option. She agreed. But from what you've described, there might be more happening here than emotional dysfunction. Your sister's financial manipulation of your parents could constitute elder abuse, especially if they're being coerced or deceived into financial decisions that harm their interests. I hadn't considered the legal implications before. They're hardly elderly. They're in their 60s. Elder abuse laws often apply to any vulnerable adult over 60, Dr. Martinez explained. Your parents may not see themselves as victims, but what you're describing, systematic financial exploitation under false pretenses, is potentially criminal. This perspective shifted my thinking. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I had a responsibility to protect my parents, even if they didn't recognize the danger. Robert helped me develop a more comprehensive investigation strategy. With his background in financial analytics, he suggested specific documents to request from Tyler and questions to ask that would reveal the full scope of Megan's deception. You need to approach this like a fraud investigation, he advised over takeout in my apartment. Gather evidence methodically, build a timeline, follow the money trail. Over the next 3 weeks, Tyler became an invaluable ally, providing bank statements, loan applications, and tax documents that revealed a disturbing pattern. What had begun as occasional parental help had evolved into systematic exploitation. The most shocking discovery came when Tyler found evidence that Megan had been gambling under multiple online accounts, including one created in my name, using my social security number. Identity theft, Robert said grimly when I showed him the documents. That's a federal offense. Claire helped me process the emotional weight of these discoveries. It's not just about the money, she pointed out during a long walk along the Charles River. It's about the calculation behind it all. She didn't just take advantage of your parents' favoritism, she weaponized it against you. The more we uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Megan had constructed an elaborate house of cards, using my name and reputation as collateral damage, while she fed a spiraling addiction. The perfect suburban mom image was a carefully maintained facade hiding financial disaster. Tyler confirmed that Megan had maxed out multiple credit cards in their names, and even taken out personal loans using their house as collateral. Most disturbingly, he discovered she had recently opened a credit card in our mother's name without her knowledge. She used your mom's excellent credit score to get a $30,000 limit, Tyler explained. It's already maxed out. I consulted with a family lawyer recommended by Dr. Martinez, bringing copies of the most damning evidence. The attorney, Miss Winters, reviewed the documents carefully. You have several options, she explained. You could report the identity theft to the police, which would likely result in criminal charges against your sister. You could file for a financial restraining order to protect your parents' assets, or you could attempt a family intervention with the evidence you've gathered. Each option carried serious ramifications. Criminal charges would devastate my parents and potentially harm my niece and nephew. A financial restraining order would require convincing my parents that Megan was exploiting them, something they seemed determined not to believe. And an intervention might just give Megan the opportunity to manipulate the situation further. I need to protect my parents, I told Miss Winters. But I also need to protect myself from being scapegoated again. Then you need to be extremely strategic about how and when you present this evidence, she advised. And you need to be prepared for the possibility that your parents may choose to believe your sister regardless of proof. I spent the next week organizing the evidence into a comprehensive file, creating a clear timeline of deception that would be difficult to dismiss or explain away. Robert helped me prepare a script for the confrontation, anticipating Megan's likely counter-arguments and deflections. You need to practice staying calm no matter what she says, he coached me. The moment you get emotional, she'll use it to undermine your credibility. We ran through scenarios repeatedly, with Robert playing Megan and throwing increasingly vicious personal attacks to test my composure. After years of marketing presentations to tough clients, I had developed a solid professional poker face. But family triggers ran deeper than business challenges. You're getting better, he encouraged, after I maintained my calm through a particularly brutal simulation. Remember, this isn't about winning an argument. It's about presenting irrefutable evidence. While building my case, I continued my deliberate social media strategy, now focusing on subtle financial literacy content, sharing articles about protecting elderly parents from scams and resources for families dealing with gambling addiction. I never mentioned my situation directly, but the content sent a clear message to anyone paying attention. Tyler reported that Megan had noticed and was becoming increasingly agitated. She's worried about what you know, he texted. She's been going through old bank statements, deleting emails. She knows something's coming. The knowledge that Megan was preparing her defenses only strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about standing up for myself anymore. It was about exposing a pattern of exploitation that had harmed everyone in its path, including Megan herself, who was clearly in the grip of an addiction she couldn't control. By month's end, I had compiled a devastating dossier of evidence: bank transfers, loan documents, credit card statements, identity theft proof, and Tyler's sworn statement about Megan's gambling addiction and financial deceptions. I had rehearsed my presentation until I could deliver it without emotion, focusing solely on facts rather than the hurt beneath them. I was as prepared as I could possibly be, but I still wasn't prepared for how far Megan would go to maintain her deception when she realized I was closing in on the truth. I should have anticipated Megan would strike first. She'd always been preemptive in her attacks, instinctively knowing when to neutralize a threat before it fully materialized. Looking back, the signs were obvious: Tyler's increasingly anxious texts, the sudden silence from my parents after weeks of attempted contact, the curious questions from extended family about my personal struggles. The ambush came on a Sunday afternoon. I was at home reviewing the evidence file one last time before scheduling what I'd planned as a controlled confrontation with my parents. My doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened it, I found my parents, Aunt Susan, Uncle Dave, and my cousin Rachel standing in the hallway. My father looked grim. My mother had clearly been crying, and the others wore expressions of pained concern. "We need to talk, Heather," my father said gravely. My apartment, my safe space, was suddenly invaded by a family intervention, but not the one I'd been planning. I was the target, not Megan. "What's going on?" I asked, though I already suspected. Once seated in my living room, my father took charge. "Heather, we're here because we're worried about you. Megan has explained everything, and while we're hurt by your actions, we want to help you." "What exactly did Megan explain?" I asked carefully. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. About how you've been trying to break up her marriage by feeding Tyler lies about gambling and financial problems. About how you've been jealous of her life and trying to sabotage it. I sat perfectly still, absorbing the breathtaking audacity of Megan's preemptive strike. She'd taken my entire case against her and flipped it, casting me as the jealous sister manufacturing evidence to destroy her perfect life. "Where's Megan?" I asked. "She's too upset to be here," my father replied. "Finding out her own sister has been trying to poison her marriage has been devastating for her." I took a deep breath. "And Tyler? Where is he?" "Has admitted everything," Aunt Susan interjected. "How you've been feeding him these conspiracy theories, manipulating him when his practice has been struggling." They had an answer for everything. Megan had constructed a narrative so perfectly tailored to our family dynamics that it was practically airtight. I was the jealous, career-obsessed sister who couldn't stand her siblings' happiness and success. Tyler was the struggling husband susceptible to manipulation in a moment of financial vulnerability. "This isn't an accusation," my mother said, reaching for my hand, which I instinctively withdrew. "This is about getting you help. We know you've been unhappy, lonely. Therapy could really—" "I'm already in therapy," I interrupted. "Have been for weeks." This seemed to confirm their suspicions rather than contradict them. "That's good." My father nodded. "Acknowledging you need help is the first step." I could see how perfectly Megan had orchestrated this. If I presented my evidence now, it would look exactly like the desperate fabrications Shed already prepared them to expect. If I became emotional, it would confirm her claims about my psychological instability. If I remained calm and analytical, it would seem cold and calculating, further proof of my manipulative nature. It was the ultimate gaslighting operation, and they had all bought into it completely. "Did Megan tell you I have a gambling addiction too?" I asked quietly. "That I've been stealing money?" My mother looked away, confirming that yes, this was part of the narrative too. "And you believed her?" "Without asking me, without seeing any evidence. She showed us evidence," my father said firmly. "Credit card statements, online gambling accounts in your name. She was trying to protect you by handling it privately, but when you started trying to break up her marriage, I felt a cold clarity settle over me. So let me understand this. You drove an hour to my apartment to confront me about accusations Megan made, which you accepted without question. You're staging an intervention based entirely on her word against mine, without ever once considering she might be lying." "Why would she lie about something like this?" Rachel asked, genuinely confused. "To preemptively discredit me before I could reveal what she's actually been doing," I replied. I stood up and walked to my home office, returning with the file ID compiled. "Everything you think I've done to Megan, she's actually done to me, and to you. I have documented evidence of her stealing money from you under false pretenses, opening credit cards in your names, and using my identity for online gambling accounts." My father waved away the folder without even glancing at it. "Megan warned us you'd have evidence. She explained how you've become obsessed with creating this alternate reality. The sheer willful blindness was staggering. In that moment, I understood that no amount of evidence would ever be enough. They had decided on their truth decades ago. Megan was the golden child who could do no wrong, and I was the difficult daughter who would always be suspect. I was about to give up entirely when my doorbell rang again. Tyler stood in the hallway, ashen-faced and trembling slightly. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was." He stopped abruptly, taking in the scene. "You started without me." My father stood up. "Tyler, you don't need to do this." Megan explained how Heather has been. "Megan is lying," Tyler interrupted flatly. "Everything she's told you is a complete inversion of the truth." The shock in the room was palpable. This wasn't part of the script Megan had prepared. "She told me you'd all be here to confront her about her gambling," Tyler continued. "She made me promise to come and support her through a family intervention. She's been setting this up for weeks." He turned to me. "I had no idea she was planning to turn this around on you. When she called this morning to confirm the time, she let slip that Shed already prepared your parents. That's when I realized what she was doing." My mother looked bewildered. "But the gambling accounts, the credit card statements." Tyler's laugh was hollow. "All real. All Megan's. She's just been using Heather's name to create some of them. I brought copies of our bank records showing the transfers to those same accounts." He pulled a USB drive from his pocket. "Everything's here, account numbers, transaction histories, withdrawal patterns. It all matches the gambling sites she accused Heather of using. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across my father's face. My mother looked physically ill. "Why would you turn against your wife like this?" my father demanded, still trying to salvage his worldview. "Because I can't live with the lies anymore," Tyler said simply. "Because our children deserve better than to grow up in a house built on deception. And because Heather deserves the truth after years of being your family scapegoat." The confrontation that followed was chaotic and painful. My aunt and uncle left quickly, uncomfortable with the family secrets being exposed. Rachel stayed, increasingly horrified as Tyler corroborated everything in my evidence file with his first-hand accounts. My parents' reactions were the most painful to witness. My mother cycled through denial, confusion, and devastation. My father grew increasingly defensive, then angry, then finally silent as the evidence mounted beyond possibility of dismissal. When they finally left, 3 hours later, nothing was resolved. My mother was in tears. My father grimly silent. They took copies of the evidence but made no promises about what they would do with it. I was emotionally exhausted, feeling neither triumphant nor defeated, just drained of everything except a strange, hollow relief that at least the truth was finally in the open. They might still choose to believe her, Tyler warned as he prepared to leave. "Shay's had decades to perfect her manipulation. This won't be over easily." He was right. The ambush had been blunted but not defeated. I had survived the direct assault on my credibility, but the war for truth was far from over. Megan would regroup and counterattack. My parents might revert to their comfortable delusions, rather than face the painful reality of how they'd been manipulated, and their own complicity in allowing it to happen. I collapsed into bed that night, physically and emotionally depleted. But beneath the exhaustion, I felt something new taking root, a quiet strength that came from standing in my truth, regardless of whether others chose to accept it. I had nearly been defeated by Megan's ambush, but in withstanding it, I discovered I was stronger than I'd ever realized, and for the first time in my life, I truly understood that my worth wasn't dependent on my family's validation. That realization, painful as it was, would prove crucial for what came next. The weeks following the ambush were eerily quiet. My parents retreated into silence, neither accepting the evidence nor explicitly rejecting it. Tyler reported that Megan was portraying herself as the victim of a conspiracy between her husband and sister. The twins were being used as emotional shields, with Megan emphasizing how our family conflict was traumatizing her children. "Classic Darvo, Dr. Martinez explained during our session. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. It's a common manipulation tactic in high-conflict personalities." I was learning an entirely new vocabulary to describe the dynamics I'd lived with my entire life. Gaslighting, triangulation, golden child and scapegoat. The clinical terms provided a framework that helped me process decades of confusion and self-doubt. Meanwhile, Robert was helping me build a more comprehensive case file, organizing the evidence chronologically and thematically for maximum impact. "We need to approach this like a prosecutor building a case," he explained, spreading documents across my dining table. "Start with the most indisputable evidence, then build toward the more complex deceptions." Tyler continued providing crucial documentation, despite the increasing pressure at home. "Megan knows I'm helping you," he admitted during a clandestine meeting at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. "She's threatened to take the kids and leave if I don't get back on her team. As she puts it, 'You don't have to do this.'" I told him, genuinely concerned about the strain on his family. "I understand if you need to protect your children." He shook his head firmly. "I am protecting my children. They deserve parents with integrity. I can't let them grow up watching their mother manipulate everyone around her without consequence." His courage strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about vindicating myself anymore, it was about breaking a multi-generational pattern of dysfunction that would otherwise continue into the next generation. The most damning evidence came unexpectedly, through Claire's connections. As a financial analyst at a major bank, she had contacts in fraud investigation, who agreed to review the documentation informally. "This isn't just casual deception," her colleague reported back. "There's a clear pattern of identity theft and financial fraud here. The accounts opened in your name and your mother's name without consent would be prosecutable offenses." Claire helped me compile a comprehensive file that went beyond family loans and into potentially criminal territory. With her expertise, we were able to document exactly how Megan had systematically used my personal information to create gambling accounts and credit lines. "She got your social security number," and date of birth from your parents' home files, Claire explained, as we traced the paper trail. They probably had your tax information or birth certificate stored somewhere she had access to. The most shocking discovery came when Tyler found evidence that my mother's credit card, the one Megan had secretly opened, had been used to place bets on the very same day Megan was orchestrating the family intervention at my apartment. She was literally gambling online while setting you up to take the fall for her addiction, Robert said incredulously when I showed him the timestamp evidence. Armed with this comprehensive documentation, I consulted again with Miss Winters, the family attorney. You have enough here for criminal charges, she confirmed after reviewing the updated file. But before we go down that road, consider what your ultimate goal is here. Is it punishment, protection, reconciliation? It was a profound question that forced me to clarify my intentions. After much reflection, I realized what I truly wanted was threefold: to clear my name completely, to protect my parents from further financial exploitation, and to create the possibility, however remote, of authentic healing within the family. Criminal charges might achieve the first two goals, Miss Winters acknowledged, but would almost certainly destroy any chance of the third. There are other options that might better serve your objectives. Together, we developed a strategic approach that balanced accountability with compassion. Rather than pursuing immediate criminal charges, we would present the evidence to my parents and Megan simultaneously, with a structured plan for addiction treatment, financial restitution, and family therapy. While make clear that if she refuses treatment or continues the deception, legal action will be the next step, Miss Winters explained. This gives her a chance to take responsibility without the immediate destruction of criminal prosecution. It was a path that required immense strength on my part, offering a measure of grace to someone who had shown me none, but it also aligned with my deepest values and offered the best chance for genuine resolution. As we finalized our approach, I worked with Dr. Martinez to prepare emotionally for the confrontation. Your sister will likely use every manipulation tactic she knows, she warned. Personal attacks, tears, blame shifting, minimizing, denial, be prepared for all of it. And remember that your parents may struggle to accept the full truth, even with irrefutable evidence. We practiced grounding techniques and developed specific responses to predictable triggers. I rehearsed maintaining my composure through simulated provocations and accusations. Your power is in your centeredness, Dr. Martinez reminded me. The moment you become reactive, you've entered her arena. Stay focused on the evidence and the path forward. I also prepared for the possibility that this final confrontation might not result in the acknowledgement or closure I hoped for. Your healing can't depend on their response, Claire cautioned during one of our preparation sessions. You need to be prepared to walk away knowing you've done everything possible, even if they choose denial. By the time we scheduled the confrontation at my parents' anniversary dinner, a symbolically significant occasion, I had assembled a formidable support system. Robert would accompany me to the restaurant and wait nearby in case I needed backup. Claire would be on standby for remote support. Tyler would attend as part of the family but prepared to corroborate my evidence if necessary. Miss Winters had drafted a formal document outlining the treatment and restitution plan, along with the legal consequences if those terms weren't met. She wouldn't be present at the dinner, but had prepared me thoroughly on how to present these options. The evening before the confrontation, I sat alone in my apartment, reviewing the evidence one final time. The file represented months of investigation, countless hours of emotional labor, and the collective efforts of people who truly cared about my well-being. Whatever happened the next day, I knew I had done everything possible to bring the truth to light. I had transformed from a person seeking validation to someone standing firmly in her own power and integrity. As I closed the file and prepared for bed, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. Tomorrow would be difficult, possibly devastating, but I was finally ready to face whatever came, not as the family scapegoat desperate for approval, but as a woman who knew her own worth and was prepared to fight for the truth, regardless of whether others chose to accept it. The restaurant my parents had chosen for their anniversary dinner was upscale and intimate. White tablecloths, ambient lighting, discreet waitstaff. I arrived precisely on time, the evidence file secured in a leather portfolio that looked appropriately formal for the setting. Robert had dropped me off after a final pep talk. Remember, no matter what happens in there, you've already won by standing in your truth. My parents were already seated, looking uncomfortably formal and slightly tense. My mother had clearly spent significant time on her appearance, perhaps hoping the celebration would somehow override the family tension. My father sat stiffly beside her, checking his watch repeatedly. Megan and Tyler arrived moments after I did, the perfect suburban couple except for the tight line of Megan's smile and the careful distance Tyler maintained beside her. I caught his subtle nod of encouragement as we were all seated. "Happy anniversary," I said, handing my parents a card containing reservations for a weekend at a luxury coastal hotel, a genuine gift I'd arranged weeks earlier, before deciding this would be our confrontation venue. My mother seemed touched but wary. My father mumbled thanks without meeting my eyes. The undercurrent of tension was palpable as we ordered drinks and appetizers, everyone performing the rituals of a celebration none of us felt. Megan took control of the conversation immediately, launching into an elaborate story about the twins' school play, complete with photos on her phone that she passed around. It was her typical strategy: dominate the narrative, center herself and her children, create a bubble of perfect family life that deflected any deeper issues. I let her continue through the first course, observing rather than interrupting. There was a manic quality to her cheerfulness, a brittle edge to her laugh. She was overcompensating, working too hard to maintain the illusion of normalcy. When there was finally a natural pause in conversation, I placed my hand on the portfolio beside my plate. "Before we continue celebrating, there's something important we need to discuss as a family." My father's expression hardened immediately. "This is not the time or place, Heather. It's exactly the time and place," I replied calmly. "Because this affects all of us, and because I care too much about this family to let these issues continue destroying us from within." Megan's smile never faltered, though her eyes narrowed slightly. "Always so dramatic, Heather. Can't we just enjoy a nice dinner without turning it into a therapy session?" I maintained steady eye contact with her. "We can enjoy many dinners after we address the financial fraud, identity theft, and gambling addiction that's draining our parents' retirement accounts." My mother gasped softly. My father started to stand, but Tyler placed a hand on his arm. "She has evidence, sir," he said quietly. "Real evidence that can't be explained away this time." I opened the portfolio and removed the first document, a comprehensive accounting of all the money my parents had given Megan over the past decade, totaling nearly $380,000. "This is the money you've provided to Megan and Tyler, believing much of it was to help me with fictitious financial problems." I slid the document toward my parents. My mother's hand trembled as she picked it up. My father refused to look. "These figures are ridiculous," Megan scoffed. "Dad, tell her she's being absurd." But my father was finally looking at the paper, his financial background allowing him to quickly grasp the implications of the numbers before him. I continued methodically, presenting evidence document by document. The credit card opened in my mother's name without her knowledge. The online gambling accounts created using my identity. Bank transfers that corresponded exactly with Megan's largest gambling losses. The timeline of deceptions spanning years. "This is a coordinated character assassination," Megan hissed, her facade cracking. "Tyler has always been jealous of my relationship with my family, and Heather, she's just bitter that my life turned out better than hers." I remained steady, neither raising my voice nor responding directly to her accusations. The account numbers, transaction records, and documentation speak for themselves. Every claim I'm making is supported by verifiable evidence. As the evidence mounted, my parents' reactions diverged. My mother grew increasingly distressed, covering her mouth as she recognized her own forged signature on loan documents. My father's face hardened into a mask of denial that gradually gave way to reluctant recognition as the proof became irrefutable. Megan's strategy shifted rapidly as she sensed she was losing control of the narrative. First came righteous indignation. "I can't believe you would ambush me like this on Mom and Dad's anniversary. This is exactly the kind of selfish behavior that's always defined you, Heather." When that failed to derail the conversation, she moved to tears and victimhood. "You have no idea what it's like raising children while trying to maintain the perfect family everyone expects. If I made mistakes, it was because I was drowning in expectations." As each manipulation tactic failed against my calm presentation of evidence, she became increasingly desperate. "You've never understood family loyalty," she accused, her voice rising enough that nearby diners glanced our way. "You're trying to turn my own husband and parents against me out of jealousy." "This isn't about loyalty or jealousy," I replied evenly. "It's about truth, accountability, and health for you and for this family." I presented the final document, Miss Winter's proposed plan for recovery and restitution. "This offers a path forward," I explained. "Addiction treatment for Megan, family therapy for all of us, a structured repayment plan to restore Mom and Dad's retirement savings, and most importantly, complete honesty from this point forward. And if I refuse this generous offer, Megan asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Then the evidence goes to the police and the credit bureaus. I said simply, identity theft and financial fraud are serious crimes. But that's not what I want. I want healing, not punishment. My father finally spoke, his voice strained. Why should we believe any of this? You've clearly been building this case for months, manipulating evidence to make your sister look bad. The old pain of his perpetual dismissal threatened to surface, but I had anticipated this reaction. That's why every document in this file has been independently verified. The bank records are authentic, the credit reports are official. Tyler has provided sworn statements, and most importantly, I turned to Megan directly. You know it's all true. Something in my calm certainty seemed to finally penetrate my father's denial. He looked at Megan, really looked at her, perhaps seeing past the golden child image for the first time. Megan, he asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. Tell me this isn't true. The moment stretched between them, my father silently pleading for a denial he could believe, Megan calculating her options and finding them increasingly limited. When her composed mask finally crumbled, it happened all at once. You have no idea what kind of pressure I've been under, she cried, tears streaming down her face. Always having to be perfect, always having to succeed. When the gambling started, it was just to have something that was mine alone, something exciting that made me feel alive. The confession, though wrapped in justification, hung in the air like a thunderclap. My mother began to sob quietly. My father looked as though he'd been physically struck. I never meant for it to go this far, Megan continued, her words tumbling out in a confused jumble of admission and excuse. The first time I borrowed money, I really did intend to pay it back. But then I needed more, and it was so easy to blame Heather because everyone already thought she was the irresponsible one. As her confession unfolded in increasingly desperate tones, I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness for everyone at the table. My sister, trapped in an addiction she couldn't control. My parents, confronting their own complicity in enabling decades of destructive family dynamics. Tyler, watching his marriage crumble under the weight of exposed lies. When Megan's emotional storm finally exhausted itself, I placed Miss Winter's document in the center of the table. We can move forward together, but only through complete honesty and accountability. This plan provides a structure for healing for all of us. My father studied the document for a long moment before looking up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. A mixture of shame, respect, and something that might have been pride. You've put a lot of thought into this, he said quietly. I have, I agreed. Because despite everything, you're still my family. And I believe healing is possible if we're willing to do the difficult work it requires. As the reality of the situation settled over the table, the path forward remained uncertain. But the truth, painful, complex, and long overdue, was finally in the open. And in that truth lay the first real possibility of authentic connection within our family. The months following that fateful anniversary dinner were among the most challenging and transformative of my life. The confrontation had broken open decades of family dysfunction, exposing raw wounds that could no longer be ignored or disguised. Megan initially vacillated between acceptance and defiance, agreeing to enter treatment one day and threatening legal action the next. When she finally checked into a specialized program for gambling addiction 3 weeks after our confrontation, it wasn't with graceful surrender, but with bitter resignation. Are you happy now? She texted me the night before she left. You've finally won. I didn't respond. Dr. Martinez had helped me understand that Megan's perception of our relationship as a competition was part of the dysfunction we needed to heal, not perpetuate. My parents' journey was equally complicated. After the initial shock wore off, my father retreated into angry silence, unable to face his role in enabling both Megan's addiction and the family dynamics that had allowed it to flourish. He's experiencing what therapists call cognitive dissonance. Dr. Martinez explained during one of our sessions. His self-image as a good father who treated his children fairly is being challenged by evidence that contradicts that narrative. That's intensely uncomfortable. My mother, surprisingly, was the first to seek help. 2 weeks after the confrontation, she asked to meet me for coffee, our first one-on-one conversation in years. I've been thinking about what you said about family therapy. She began hesitantly. I think I'd like to try it. It was a small opening, but a significant one. We found a family systems therapist who specialized in addictions, impact on families, and my mother began attending sessions alone, while my father continued to resist. Tyler faced his own challenges, balancing support for Megan's recovery with protecting their children and rebuilding financial stability. He and I maintained a careful alliance, sharing information without undermining Megan's treatment process. The therapists say her recovery has to be her choice, not something she's doing to please or appease others, he explained during one of our check-in calls. So I'm trying to support, without enabling, which is a really difficult line to walk. I understood that balance all too well. Establishing healthy boundaries, while remaining open to genuine healing, required constant vigilance and self-awareness. For me, the most profound work happened in individual therapy, where I gradually unpacked a lifetime of being the family scapegoat. You developed an identity based on achievement and self-sufficiency, because those were the only paths to validation available to you, Dr. Martinez observed. The question now is, who are you, when you're not constantly trying to prove your worth? It was a question that initially terrified me. Who was I beyond my accomplishments, my carefully constructed professional success, my perpetual striving? What remained when the driving need for familial approval was removed? The answer emerged slowly, through deliberate self-exploration. I discovered simple pleasures I'd never allowed myself time to enjoy: early morning runs along the Charles River, weekend cooking projects, photography classes that awakened a creative side I'd long neglected. Robert remained a steadfast presence, his friendship gradually evolving into something deeper as I became more authentically myself. Claire introduced me to her wider social circle, where I formed connections based on mutual interests rather than obligation or utility. 3 months after entering treatment, Megan began the difficult process of making amends. Her first letter to me was stiff and clearly therapist-directed, but it represented a starting point. I recognize that I have caused you harm through my dishonesty and manipulation, she wrote. While I cannot undo the past, I am committed to behaving with integrity going forward. It wasn't a warm sisterly reconnection, but it was honest, perhaps the first truly honest communication we'd ever shared. My father's resistance finally began to soften when he realized the extent of the financial damage to his retirement security. With my mother's gentle insistence, he agreed to attend a financial counseling session, which eventually led to family therapy participation. His first genuine apology came 6 months after the confrontation, during a carefully structured therapy session. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began awkwardly, "about how I'd always found you difficult to love. I want you to know that wasn't true. The difficulty wasn't in loving you, it was in understanding you. You were so different from what I expected in a daughter, so independent and strong-willed. I didn't know how to connect with that, so I focused on Megan because she was easier." The admission wasn't perfect, still containing traces of the old pattern of placing responsibility on my difficult nature, but it represented a significant shift in awareness, an opening toward genuine accountability. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, maintaining the boundaries I'd worked hard to establish. "I hope we can build a relationship based on who I actually am, not who you expected me to be." By the 1-year anniversary of our confrontation, our family had begun a halting, imperfect healing process. Megan had completed intensive treatment and joined a maintenance program, acknowledging her addiction publicly and committing to recovery. My parents had established a structured repayment plan for their depleted retirement accounts, with both Megan and Tyler contributing monthly payments. Family gatherings were smaller, more intentional, and guided by clear boundaries. We learned to recognize old patterns when they emerged, and to interrupt them before they regained momentum. When Thanksgiving arrived a year after the mockery that had sparked my journey of truth-seeking, we gathered at my parents' home with a new awareness. The conversation was sometimes awkward, often careful, but fundamentally more authentic than any family interaction I could remember. Most significantly, Robert accompanied me as my partner, his steady presence beside me a reminder of how far I'd come in allowing genuine love into my life. After dinner, my mother pulled me aside, pressing something into my palm, my grandmother's emerald earrings. "These were always meant for you," she said simply. "I'm sorry it took me so long to remember that." The gesture wasn't a magical healing of all past wounds, but it represented something precious, a step toward restitution, a small recognition of past wrongs, and a commitment to doing better going forward. As we prepared to leave that evening, Megan approached me in the hallway, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I've been thinking a lot about why I felt such a need to compete with you our whole lives," she said quietly. "The therapist says I always sensed your strength, your independence, and it made me feel inadequate somehow, like I needed to tear you down to build myself up." I nodded, not quite ready to absolve, but willing to acknowledge the insight. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she continued. Just maybe a chance to get to know each other as the people we are now, not the roles we were assigned. It was the most honest thing my sister had ever said to me. "I'd like that," I replied, and found that I genuinely meant it. As Robert and I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The pain had been necessary, the confrontation essential, the boundaries vital, but the healing unexpected, imperfect, and ongoing was the true victory. I had discovered that standing in my truth didn't mean standing alone. It meant creating space for authentic connections based on mutual respect, rather than manipulation and obligation. It meant recognizing my inherent worth, independent of achievement or approval. And perhaps most importantly, it meant understanding that true family bonds are built on honesty and accountability, not performance and pretense. The journey wasn't over. True healing rarely follows a neat, linear path. There would be setbacks and old patterns to confront. But for the first time in my life, I was moving forward as my authentic self, neither defined by family dysfunction, nor constrained by the need to prove my worth. And in that freedom, I had found something I'd been seeking my entire life: the knowledge that I was, and always had been, enough. Thank you for joining me on this journey from hurt to healing. If you've ever experienced family dynamics like these, I'd love to hear how you navigated them. Drop a comment below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories of resilience and transformation, and share with someone who might need to hear that standing in their truth is always worth it. Remember, healing is possible even from the deepest wounds. Sometimes it just takes courage to break the cycle.